Okay, we're answering the question how to peel, seed, and dice a tomato. We're also answering the question how to make what's called tomato brunoise, which also means extremely finely minced foods, brunoise means. And then how to make cold diced tomato concasse, which is not cooked. Tomato concasse would certainly refer to two different tomato preparations. One would be cooked and one would be uncooked. And we're going to give you the uncooked version here quickly. So we're answering three questions here. The first one, how to peel, seed, and dice a tomato. Now this is a tomato shark. One does not need this tool to do this, and this is the most efficient way of doing it. See, because I can do the same thing by taking the core of the tomato out with a small knife or a paring knife, but for some reason, generally speaking, it's just not as efficient as the other one, but it's pretty close. But then again, we're oversold on tools and equipment in our society anyway, and I have this saying, it's always a sign of a weak cook that complains about his equipment. Can you imagine someone saying, well, I couldn't peel and seed and dice my tomato because I didn't have a tomato shark? All right, now that we have the core out, we put a little bit of X on there, like that. We drop it into simmering water, okay? I have some ice water here. We're going to plunge it into the ice water after the skin starts blistering. Now, here's another way of making cold minced tomato concasse, but it's not skinned in this particular case. First, you cut the tomato in half. Then you cut the edges off. Then you move the tomato as you're cutting it, so you end up with that. Now for a perfectly minced tomato brunoise with the skin on. Always being sure to cut all the way through so you don't have pieces of tomato. Now there's some nice minced tomato that one can use for the garnish of any number of things, okay? Now our tomato in the water is just about done. It's nice and blistered. And we're going to take it out. As you can see, when I say blistered, the skin itself is starting to peel right off the tomato. I'm going to put in a little bit of ice water to stop the cooking process and also to make it easier for us to handle. That's easy enough for me, okay? Now, to take the skin off, boom, comes right off. And to seed it, cut it in half. This particular tomato, it's not that juicy, but typically you would save all the juice and the skins and stuff and use them in one of your stocks or something, wherever something calls for some tomato, which you're not making very much, in which case you might just throw it out. Okay. Now we have two things here. We're going to do something with each one of them. This one is just peeled, seeded, and chopped tomato. And so when you see a recipe that calls for that, that's what it wants. Okay? Now, if we want tomato concasse, which is cold, which also means tomato concasse cold also means peeled, seeded, and finely diced tomato, which is what we're going to do with this, which is the peeled version of this one here. And there you have it. Those are three different kinds of tomatoes. Minced tomato concasse with the skin, peeled, seeded, and chopped tomato, fine diced, uncooked tomato concasse. Have a great tomato day. Okay, I'm answering the question, how to make hot tomato concasse. Now, of course, every cook might have their own version of how this is flavored or seasoned. But good hot tomato concasse, in accordance with tradition of French cooking, which is where this comes from, means cooking the tomato in a little bit of hot oil slightly, and then adding garlic, salt, pepper, and white wine, and maybe some sugar if it needs it, and reducing it till it's somewhat dry. And then this is used as a flavoring component for different things. You can add it to all kinds of things, and you'll notice as you go through the index from recipe to recipe, from time to time you will see a recipe that says, add 2 tablespoons tomato concasse, blah, 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 okay? So, I'm going to show you how that's made real quick. First, we're going to get ourselves a hot pan with a little bit of good olive oil in it. And I'm going to take some drained, canned, diced tomatoes that were in juice. And we're going to add them to the pan, being careful not to burn ourselves. So when I said cook slightly, I said just cook slightly, which is what I'm doing right now. We're going to add pepper, salt. We're going to add a little bit of sugar on the front end because I know it's going to need some. Then we're going to add some garlic. And we're going to give that a little mix. I'm going to add a little bit more garlic and a little bit more oil for the amount of tomato I got here. You'll notice how I made that adjustment as I was making this. Part of the whole approach to doing, quote, successful at-will improvisational cooking, if you will, is to understand when to make those adjustments. That looked a little bit dry, so that's why I added a little bit more oil to it. Okay, now we're going to splash this with some dry white wine. And we're going to time-elapse this video demonstration slightly. We're going to give this a few minutes to reduce down till it's somewhat dry. Then we're going to adjust the final seasoning, and then we'll put it away till we're ready to use some tomato concasse. Okay, we're back to the tomato concasse, just like I told you would be immediately. It's been about 5 minutes has elapsed, and the wine is all, this is nice and dry now. You see what I mean? Now we're going to adjust the seasoning. This needs a little bit more sugar. You want to cut the acidity from the tomato down. That's what the sugar's all about. You're not making it sweet. It needs a little bit of salt and pepper too. Still needs a little bit more sugar, believe it or not. Okay, there you have it. And here's what it looks like. You don't need my glasses to see it, okay? Here's what it looks like. See how it's nice and dry? It's even standing up on the plate there a little bit. And this is a really nice flavoring agent for a number of different kinds of dishes. This is definitely a required knowledge thing for cooking. Knowing how to use this, it just enhances just about everything you put it in. There you go, hot tomato concasse.